participate in this conversation, and you may do so by looking at your Q&A button and asking questions there, and those questions will be taken towards the end of the webinar. Right now, you're going to be joined by President Serene Jones, who will serve as the moderator for today's discussion. And today she is joined by Professor Sue Pak, along with students Neonu, Jewell, and Monique Fortuné. Dr. Serene Jones, I turn it over to you now.
Great, thank you, Rita. I'm so excited to be here today and to be having these knowledge and nourishment conversations with people who are close with Union. So many of you are very dear friends and supporters. And boy, what a wonderful group we have gathered here. I know that many of you have written and with questions and called and checked in on Union, wanting to know how we're faring through all of the challenges that we're facing today. And I'll just begin by doing a quick update. As many of you know, in March, when we realized the extent of the pandemic, Union quickly turned and went online, and we were able to finish the semester online. In late May, we made the decision to change our year around a little bit next year. And so starting in the fall, in September, we're going to have a one-month series of courses that will be intensives, that will be done remotely. And then when our new dorm building opens in October, we'll be starting the fall semester. We're starting remotely, and we may continue remotely throughout the semester. But we are open and flexible about small group meetings should that become possible. But we're really looking forward to next year and all of the important learning that will continue at Union, especially at this point in time when we're wrestling with the consequences of a global pandemic that continues, that is not abating, that impacts communities of colors in dramatically different ways than it impacts white communities. And in the midst of that, we see the rising of an anti-Black violence movement, an anti-racism movement in this country in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. We feel the pain and the power of that movement deeply at Union. And we're also in the middle of a very significant economic crisis and a crisis in New York City, having been at the center of all that is impacting us. So there's not a better moment, I think, to be a student at Union and to be wrestling with what's happening in the world in a theological context where the moral and the ethical questions stay at the center of our reflections. And there's no place in our curriculum where that happens more viscerally and more directly, more emotionally, and more challengingly than in our field education. It's where the rubber hits the road and the student learning curve shoots through the ceiling. So I'm going to turn it over now to the person that teaches, and even the better word for it is orchestrates, like a conductor, that whole process. I remember well when Union decided to rename it simply from field education to integrative and field-based learning. And that came under the amazing leadership of Dr. Sue Pak. So I'm going to turn it now over to Sue. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. It's just a pleasure to have my two star students here who's done amazing work in field education last year, even against all challenges and odds that we faced going into the pandemic. So we are just looking forward to hearing from their experience. But just to start to kind of frame the conversation, you know, we discussed this, Serene and I, back when 11 years ago, before I took on this position, to think about the goal of this work is not simply getting practical skills in an academic setting, but it's really to provide a learning community an opportunity that is at once experiential, reflective, embodied, integrative, and formative for the cultivation of moral and pastoral imagination. So I like to think that we are cultivating moral and pastoral imagination through our work at integrative and field-based education. And what a important thing now that we need more than ever, moral and pastoral imagination.
Yeah.
So just to kind of give you some brief statistics in terms of who are the students, right? I mean, we have two wonderful students here, but this past year, I had 52 students going through field education. And among 52 students, we had about 61.5% in churches or congregational ministries, which might come as a surprise because we hear so often that, students are not going into pastoral ministry. Well, we have always kind of bucked the trend in that quietly and silently. Majority of our students have been placed in traditional congregational ministry. So that is a surprise. 12%, and it's on the rise, of students are in chaplaincies. And half of that percentage is inside prison setting. That's also, we're on the rise, and we have a new chaplaincy concentration that's starting in the fall to respond to a number of students who want to be better trained and educated for this chaplaincy that is sort of learning to figure out what it means. It's much bigger than what we're used to seeing in the hospitals or in military or in the prisons. We're seeing them in the protests. We call them protest chaplains. We see them in techs. We have a former student who just started a tech chaplaincy, and I connected her to the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab. So there are all these very important and innovative ways that pastoral and spiritual care is being happening. And then 21% in nonprofit and social service agencies, and about 5.5% in Buddhist communities and organizations. So so we see the kind of makeup of our students. So, and I just want to maybe just switch to what happened back in March when pandemic hit. And, we got notification that we are going online very quickly. And, what does it mean for students who had to actually move away from New York City to be where they feel safe and distant from the crowded spaces in New York. And so they had to do that in the middle of the semester while keeping, being in the field site somehow remotely and doing all the coursework at the same time. So that's been a real challenge. And I know that our two students could talk about that, but so in terms of the way I've been thinking about how we might help transition is to really think about and acknowledge, did we really sign up for all this? I would ask the two students, did you sign up for this? Did you know you were signing up for this? Right? And say, so how does this impact your vocation? And we ask the question almost every week. So where are you? How are you? And so what? Right? Those three questions, right? Where are you? And that could mean more than physical, but in your spiritual, emotional, how are you? And so what? And how do we navigate this together? I could go on and on more, but I'll leave some space for other questions that Serene you might have. You want to
No,
bring
I would love to just turn to the two students and ask those three questions, because they're great questions and maybe a good way to start the conversation. So maybe Monique, you want to start?
Surely. I would probably say where I am, as the spiritual would say, as the Christian spiritual would say, how long, oh Lord, how long? It's a lot going on, but also in Buddhist tradition, being aware of Sangha, being aware that I have community, and also in Islam, that we're looking for salam. We're always discovering salam within, and we're discovering salam without, and being with community. The peace of the Creator is with us, and thank God for family of spirit and family of blood. I don't know where I would be without the Union family, and all present company included. So that's the first thing, to really understand that we're in a global pandemic, and God has been showing up and showing out. And I got confirmations throughout my work at Middle Collegiate Church this spring that, number one, as we say in Hebrew, Emmanuel, God with us, and that my call has become more pronounced and more clear in the work that I am doing in spiritual formation, particularly spiritual education, and the work that I've done with Bible in the Middle at Middle, and the work that I have done in worship and in my preaching, and also the great growth and support that I've received from Reverend Jackie Lewis at Middle, particularly in the area of spiritual formation, as well as Executive Minister Amanda Ashcroft. I've had significant and important guidance, and I know God brought them. And it's also been a very humbling experience, because when I came to Union, I said, oh, I know exactly what I want to do in ministerial leadership. And as the conversation progresses, I'll talk more about how, oh boy, I was humbled very quickly. So I think I covered everything in my statement. Yeah.
That's great. And what a wonderful field site, and how lucky they are to have
Yes.
you. Neonu, you want to take a shot at that? Those
Sure.
two
Thank you. And I love the framework of, where are you? How are you? And so what? And
Mhm.
I think Dr. Pak really was able to embody that framework, because she was one of the first people who was willing, in March, when we made this shift, we thought we were taking spring break for a short period of time. It was extended, and we knew that the world was changing. And she was one of the first people to be vulnerable about where she was and how she was, and that this was challenging, and that times were uncertain, and created a space to be open to say, I'm not okay, or I'm not sure where I am, or wherever we were, that it was a safe space, and that it was important to articulate that. And so bringing that framework to our interactions in our group meetings for the field-based education set up what I took back to my own community. And I have an integrative, interactive space that was already online pre-pandemic, where we meet every other Sunday to talk about all things faith and empowerment from an interreligious perspective. And I was able to take those questions into that space and ask people very early on, where are you? How are you? To give them an opportunity to give voice in a way that I was able to give voice, in the way I felt so much gratitude that I was in a community that acknowledged it was important to allow people to just share how they're feeling. And I was able to take that into the community that I lead, and then to get to now, so what? To use sacred texts, to use our spiritual guides, to say, okay, this is where we are, now what? How can we draw on some spiritual assessment, theological reflection, to give us specific tools that we can take into this week, so that this week feels better than last week?
Amazing, amazing. I just wonder, last week we had 2 alums who are chaplains doing frontline care in hospitals and in carceral system. And they talked about the impact that COVID has had on their ministry. And to try to explain what happened, in that we had to close down very quickly and go remote, and then continue to learn and to do field work in the midst of that, capture some of it. And you've also described, bigger dimensions to that. But this pandemic is something like none of us have ever experienced in our lifetime. And we were in March, April, and May at the epicenter of the pandemic globally, with hundreds and hundreds of people dying daily and the numbers growing. And that had a profound impact on me. My world suddenly looked like a very different kind of world, and my expectations for what was ahead. But I wonder if each of you could talk about how it changed you and vocationally, how the so what shifted during this time of extremis that you happen to be in the middle of because of your having the courage to be a student at Union Theological Seminary.
I can start with that. First and foremost, I really appreciated when we had our sessions every single Monday. Sue and the teaching fellows would do some type of ritual. Ritual shifted for me, where I would rush. Before the pandemic, I was rushing through spiritual reading, or I would rush through meditation. And the mindfulness in which we were guided during those Monday, well, for me, it was afternoons. I know for Neonu, she took the evening section. And the large lesson of how on earth are you going to be a full vessel if you're empty? So the message constantly during our class time, and also I thank the staff and called clergy at Middle for always remembering to ask us, how are you taking care of yourself? Are you hydrated? What practices are you involved in now? And that varied from person to person. Because keep in mind, not only did I have friends and family that died during COVID. My uncle died right before the pandemic really hit New York City. I am still in a place of transition in terms of grief and mourning and putting certain things in order in terms of, again, how long, Lord, how long? But also great lessons have come forth from this in terms of how kind I am to myself, how much kinder I am to the people I love, how kind I am to people that I connect to in terms of pastoral care. That was the thing that freaked me out. I'm not going to lie. I said, with all the grief in the morning I was going through in terms of physically losing people, because we know, yes, spiritually people are in our hearts, et cetera, but we're still human. There's still things that we're feeling. We're still feeling loss. When Amanda one afternoon, she said, you're ready. She said, I want you to call 35 people and check on them, check on our members. And I'm Amanda. She said, Monique, she said, trust me. She said, God will work. And I mean, I had a range of interactions from, I don't go to the church anymore, bam, and they hung up the phone, to people who said, I just took the test, pray for me, to someone who had just lost their son to COVID. So it was an opportunity for me to say, okay, let me see God in in our eyes and in our voices, and stop thinking about you, Monique, and really look to community for comfort and connection. So that's how I shifted. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would agree. The thought of focusing out has made all the difference. And there have been many days where the only thing I felt like was giving me hope and inspiration was the ways that I thought I could contribute through my spiritual discernment and vocation. Knowing that we had our Sacred Space Sunday coming up, and there were people possibly who were not in community, who were getting calls like myself about those around them that were sick, that were dying, and no outlet. And how can I provide a safe space for those communications, but also some perspective, some anchor, some foundation to provide some level of meaning to what's going on. For example, one week we talked about, we called it time to re-up, that this was a time to reimagine, to reinvent, to reconnect with your family, to reflect. What is it that we can take from this time to have it make meaning? And trusting that the divine was going to work through me to give me the words, because I didn't have them on my own. So this time certainly has connected me to my own calling and this divine voice that comes through me as me, and to trust it, and that it will show up when it needs to show up if I will allow it. And so that has really supported me, and then really got me clear on what I want to be my life's work, to be able to continue in this scholarly work, to continue in this spiritual space, to continue to share the importance of interreligious engagement and religious inclusion, so that we can be reaching out across differences to lift everyone up during this time, and to be able to draw on all the divine sources that are available to us. That is what keeps me going when I look at the news and it really gets me down.
Yeah. Dr. Pak, you listen to this, and you listen to it every week, and
I do. I'm the luckiest person, because I
Yeah.
hear this. I see the amazing work that students are doing, and I am so honored to be walking alongside them and accompanying their struggles, their journeys, their joys, their insights, the formation. And I would also add, I mean, for me, it was a clarifying moment that I need to be here with the students. That, I always think about, oh, what do I do next after this? I mean, what other things can I do? It was absolutely clarifying. I need to be here. I don't know what it's going to look like when we come through this, but I want to be a part of rebuilding, reimagining the way we do our theological education, and how students are cultivating and formed for moral and pastoral imagination. And it became absolutely clear. And so it was a clarifying and opportunity moment for me as well. And I also wanted to sort of highlight the things that Union is always considering, which has to do with injustice. It's about social justice. And even, when we're going through COVID and the pandemic, we knew that African-American communities, Native American communities were impacted by it disproportionately. And of course, the Black Lives Matter movement that kind of had a peak after we finished our semester, although that's always in the back of our mind as we talk about, what is white supremacist culture show up? How do they show up in organization? That we discuss that in class. And so it's never far from us, but I would love to hear how both Monique and Neonu have been working, ministering, caring during this time, particularly since May, and during this time of Black Lives Matter movement, which is, emblazing the world.
Well, I live in the Bronx. So for me, I felt it was important after I finished studying, and Neonu knows what we were going through electronically, trying to get on Moodle, then trying to finish papers. And I had the privilege of working with several Union alums and just siblings in faith to put together a prayer vigil at Van Cortlandt Park in early June. And when we had our first Zoom meeting, one of the first things we said is that we don't want political or elected officials there. We want all faiths, and we want all siblings to come together just for a time for us to pray and to be one and to check in on each other. We created, when we went to Van Cortlandt Park, we created a makeshift altar, and people were hungry. People were hungry. We had brothers and sisters who needed references for shelter. We took care of them. But we had Jesuits there, and we had a Buddhist priest there, and we had a rabbi there, and New Day's pastor, Tabitha Holly, who had planted the seed and then just called us all into that experience. 350 plus people, social distancing And we were very responsible in taking care of each other that day. The 50th precinct was astounded about how peaceful and how powerful we were. We were intergenerational, intercultural, interracial. And so that's a big manifest from this work, from me doing the field ed and the integrated work that I now felt strong in pastoral care to be able to be and to hold people sacredly. And we're now still working at Middle this summer, doing worship work. Thank God I'll be preaching again and working more intimately on particular viral and virtual aspects of the outreach of Middle. We did the Revolutionary Love, had the privilege of being an intern and working on that, where we really are focusing on Black Lives Matter and making sure that we put an end to police brutality. And so the call has come in many ways. It's been very surprising. Still on the journey.
Yeah. Absolutely. A couple of things have come up in these most recent weeks. In the different spaces that I am in, I was able to hear a lot of different voices reflect on what's going on in the world. Black voices, people who were out there engaged in the protest and talking about that experience, people who were able to take their young children out to the protest and explain to them why they were protesting. Folks who felt that they wanted to go and protest, but from a health standpoint and COVID-19 did not feel comfortable doing so, and so had guilt about what am I doing to support in this moment, to others who are in corporate spaces who are dealing with it and saying, how do we bring this message of equity and the importance of Black lives into the corporate spaces? And then those saying, well, what are we going to do now? What can we do legislatively? What are we going to do in terms of changing laws? And so because of my multidisciplinary background, I was hearing from so many people and people having a wide range of views, but everyone feeling deeply. So at the Nia Center, what we decided to do is have what we do on occasion, have a ritual of truth telling, where we brought together on our sacred space, which we would normally go live to say, no, there will be no, as the song goes, this will not be televised. And we gave opportunity to each person to just share, as we talked about earlier, where they were and how they were feeling. So oftentimes, many Black males don't feel comfortable saying what they experience. No one wants to hear it. No one's going to believe it. They're going to think I was at fault. So to create these safe spaces where you can really share your experience and there's no feedback, there's no judgment, it's just an opportunity to pour out was absolutely beautiful. And we heard so many different viewpoints and people were just appreciative of an opportunity to share. So that's one of the things that we have done, that our center has done during this time, and will seek to create more opportunities because engagement and activism is critical, that we're out there taking action, but as important is just creating safe spaces for people to be heard.
Amen. Amen.
And amen.
Oh, what powerful witnesses. I know we're at 1 o'clock and we're at the point where we're going to open this up to our participants to ask questions. And thank you, Rita, for coming back on and leading us through that. But before we do the questions, I just want to say I'm just very moved and I'm deeply appreciative for both of you talking about your experiences, sharing with us, and deeply appreciative of this amazing teacher. Supak. So thank you all.
She is.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Serene, I share in your enthusiasm and gratitude for our students and professor. We just, again, say thank you for doing this and taking time to be with us today. So questions are already starting to come in, and I encourage you to continue to write your questions. Just use the Q&A. And also, I would like to maybe take us in a little slightly different direction Supak has already charged us and challenged us to ask the questions, where are you? How are you? And so what? So if you just want to also just share any of those answers to that, I'll be happy to share that with the rest of the team as well. So again, where are you? How are you? So what? So the first question that's already come in, what are suggestions, these are to the students, what are suggestions for practices that we can actually incorporate when we're feeling burnt out due to homework and losing parish members and family members due to COVID? So again, what are some suggestions for practices for students when we're totally stressed? Yeah, Monique, do you want to start?
Yes. The first thing that I would say is give yourself the gift of silence. Because the thing about it is that I don't know about many of you who are listening, when people find out either you're a seminarian or you're in care somewhere, depending on the tradition, everybody starts calling. Oh, can you pray? Oh, can you help? Can you? And that's all of us pretty much who are in this work. We're natural helpers, we're natural supporters. But there are times when I really implore you, turn off the television, move away from social media, find your special time, your special place. I'm an early bird, so I get up very early and I like to be with the sun and rise with the sun. That's who I am. And that's when I find time for silence and meditation, sacred reading. And now it manifests differently for different people. For some people, their sacredness comes in taking a 10-mile run. Other people, journaling. But you must find time to be with the Creator in silence and to just settle before you want to run out and do and do and do. We're beings first. We're divine beings first. So that
Support can come in many different ways. And certainly that could look like, having a game time over Zoom or whatever platform you use, as many people are doing, because a lot of people in this time is very lonely, particularly if you live alone or even if you are living with others and just missing that connection. So seeking connection in whatever way supports you. And that might look like support in the way of a therapist, your spiritual guide. During this time, my husband is a Reiki master. We've been offering complimentary Reiki services to those that are out there and engaged on the front lines. And so seeking support, I think, is critical because it's a time when you shouldn't think that you should have to get through this on your own. And in addition to that, as Monique said, what are the things that support you in feeling at peace? During this time, I've taken walks, I meditate, I do yoga. I look to be intentional in my day about carving out something that gets me back to me in addition to whatever spiritual and ritual practices that you have.
Great, thank you. Our next question, one I should say first, Monique, there's a colleague who is offering her along with all of us, our complete sympathy for your loss of your family members. So we stand with you in that moment of grief.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Our next question, has the pandemic changed your vocation? And before you answer, and Naomi, I'd start with you, but before you answer that, I'll just say some things about Neonu. She is a third-year M.Div student. I don't think we said that at the beginning. She has 25 years of training, facilitation, legal, and corporate experience. She has empowered thousands through her focus on personal development, transformational leadership, and promoting inclusive cultures where people can live and work together effectively across difference. She develops and facilitates webinars, workshops, corporate training, and gives spiritual talks. She also provides strategic leadership, support, and executive coaching. She's a member of the teaching faculty for the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity. And you can assume by all of that she's a trained attorney. So a lot of that comes easy to her. So she's already changed vocations once. So talk about, if you can answer this question, has the pandemic had another influence on that in a different way?
Yes, it has. I have been in this spiritual vacillation since entering union as to what would be my what's next. And I am clear that I want to continue my academic and scholarly interest and will be moving forward with getting a PhD focusing on interreligious engagement and social ethics. And what has been going on in the world these past weeks and months is just really affirmed and confirmed that, particularly the question of what is the role of interreligious engagement in social movements and social change. And so to be a voice that speaks into these issues that support people not only theologically, but practically in terms of what they can take away from the things that we are so blessed to spend so much time reading, researching, learning, and talking about in these wonderful spaces. How do we get that out to the masses to support them in their daily lives? And so that's very exciting for me. And so that's what I was referring to in terms of in all of this turmoil and uncertainty, thinking that I may have a voice to contribute as the years and days go forward to actually have things be different is what keeps me motivated and inspired.
Wonderful, thank you. And Monique, before you answer, I would like to read a little bit about your background as well. Monique Fortuné is a third-year M.Div student at Union. She is also president of Fortuné and Associates. It is a consulting company specializing in public speaking, coaching, and business and organizational communication strategies. Ms. Fortuné is a published poet and writer. Her new volume of poetry entitled When Words Become Air will be available in fall of 2020. And I will just add a personal note. I had a chance to hear one of those poems from her poetry collection, and it's absolutely incredible. So I don't know, we have like 2 minutes at the end. Perhaps you could read that, but it's really quite beautiful. So the same question to you, has the pandemic changed your vocation?
Absolutely. Like Neonu, I believe Union has really helped me. I have to really give shout out to my professors, including Dr. Pak. We've had great conversations about creative writing in terms of making peace with my creative and scholarly side. So I am interested in pursuing a doctorate in education. I more than likely will be looking at interreligious education elements and how that can be really, really manifested in a very practical sense. I am already an adjunct professor at Fordham University, and many of you know that I have a background in media, and I was also a higher education administrator. But something that is critically important to me is that our students, our young people, all of our siblings in the world understand that real revolution comes by being well educated and being well versed, and really knowing that this is a time of great global transition. Certain things must die so we can live better. And I believe that I will no longer hide and be shy about a force I need to be globally. I'm very clear about that.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Pak, is this typical? I mean, is this what we
Yeah, I told you I was the luckiest professor at Union Theological Seminary. Wow. I get to work with this every week.
So Professor Pak, is it when our students come in and we talk to them about field ed and they engage in that and they want to make a difference in the world, what is that first step? How do you try to match them? And what is that? How do you go about making the match process?
Well, I mean, different people and different people with different ideas will do it differently, right? Union students are not, I mean, the two of you could say it's not true, but I mean, not really like to fit in any mold that's laid out. So, so basically I could provide some very loose kind of structure to go through that discernment process, but it really is a discernment process. And very often students will come, I mean, you know, Neonu's field site is also a unique one. And, you know, Monique found middle to be where she needs to be. But we have very creative field sites that, students will say, I need to do this, and this is where I want to really spend my year honing my skills, understanding where I need to be, and the discernment process. I would say the most important thing to look for is a mentor. So yes, field sites as a site is important and what you do, but more importantly, I always say, look for the right person who will supervise you, because the work can be done in many different ways, in many different contexts. But that theological reflection, the time with your mentor and your supervisor, that is so important. So that's my general rule, is to say, look for the right person, then look for the site. Because we can't always find, I mean, Monique might say, I do have a perfect site, and you do have a perfect site. But I tell students, do not panic. You're not going to look for that perfect site. You know, I mean, they spend a whole 6 months looking for that one perfect site. And I'll say, look for a really good mentor first.
Wow.
That would be my advice.
Great advice. I have a couple of comments here. So this is from Angela, and this is a comment. As a hospital chaplain, I am gratified to see Union embrace this new area of study. When I was there from 2005 through 2008, I craved a deepening of my call to chaplaincy. Since I entered with 4 units of CPE, there was little offered beyond my education that directly spoke to my calling. Bravo to all of you. Bravo indeed.
Angela.
Jeremy would like to add, when one central gift in ministry, in this case, singing in ensembles and congregations, is not possible, health, safety, etc., how do we discover engagement and community? And then Monique, I'll ask you to answer this quickly, then I'll try to get to that next question. And then Neonu, if it's okay with you, I'll say the third question for you. Yeah, Monique, do you want to answer this one?
Oh, I'm going to be very efficient. We have in our midst at Middle incredible musicians who literally harmonize all these great voices each and every Sunday. Please visit middlechurch.org. We have services at 11:45, and we've been able to have longer and richer conversations about worship because we have to be mindful about things such as the digital divide. Can we invite certain people with responsible social distancing to enjoy the services and to hear the music and to pray and we've even done some liturgical dancing. You know, we've been able to do message for all ages where we bring all of the ages in to celebrate. So it is a lot of work. We have a great editor in Jeff Berman who literally harmonizes all of the voices, and our whole choir, whether it is the gospel choir or whether it is the concert choir, we have done some amazing things to make sure that the music and the art stays in good harmony and in good place. It's possible. It's a lot of work, but it's possible.
Wow.
I hope I answered the question.
No, you did. Thank you. So one last statement from Donna, and then Neonu, if you can just have a word to say, and then Serene will have the last word, both she and Sue, if that's okay. There will be a survey at the end, so we ask to our guests, please take the survey. We always want to improve these and kind of get it right, and so we'd love to have your feedback. We appreciate that. So Donna said, so glad to see these wonderful shout outs to the value of field education. It is the place where action meets reflection and so much learning occurs. Such gratitude to Union for all these years. Right, Neonu, do you want to just reflect on that comment?
Absolutely. Yes. Invaluable. It's invaluable. And from the mentoring process, I was blessed to have a wonderful person in Dr. Jane Huber support me, someone who was there to encourage, to stretch, to challenge, to inquire, to support, just anything that I needed to continue to move forward as a human first, but also someone seeking, vocational discernment, spiritual discernment, and the actual program itself, in addition to all of the wonderful experiences that you have by taking those things that you're encountering in the classroom out into the world as lived experiences to see, how does the thing that I preached about and learned about in class, how does that play when I'm standing in the pulpit? How does it operate when I'm in conversation with individuals who are dealing with real world challenges? And so the obvious invaluable benefit of, before you complete your program, getting to experience what it means to be engaged in ministerial and pastoral care out there in the world. But also just the weekly sessions that we had that gave us concrete, specific strategies to deal with all of the things that we would encounter. As Dr. Pak talked about, we talked about white supremacy culture long before the pandemic hit. Talk about sexual ethics, talk about what it means to pray from a place of playing, of blessing, of eating, and how it shows up in all of the different areas of your life. So it really is not only integrative, but I would say a holistic program that without it, the ministerial experience would just not be the same.
Wonderful. Thank you. President Jones, will you close us out for the day? Thank you. Thank you.
I just give thanks and am deeply moved and inspired. And I have had my daily meditation in listening to the three of you and your field education. And I want to give the very last word to our honorable teacher and imaginative moral leader, Supak.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for your continued support of the program, Serene. It's always been felt and appreciated. I would just leave with, this is something that I tell the students all the time, sustainability practices, because we need to sustain ourselves through the long haul. And I just want to leave this with a paradigm of my colleague and friend, Monique Moultrie, who talked about care as a form of resistance. And now more than ever, care is a form of resistance, right? And so it's just the aftercare, what happens right after something happens, long-term care that we need to think about how we're going to move through in a long haul, and collective care, not just individual, but collective care. So I encourage everyone to continue working on our sustainability practice, care as form of resistance.
Wonderful. It's a perfect last word. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to our wonderful guests that we so appreciate you. Please join us for the next Knowledge and Nourishment. We'll have that information in the survey, and we all appreciate you. Thank you to our students, and thank you to our faculty and our president, right? Long live Union. Yeah, bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.